From Valentine's Day to Amazon's $31.8 billion quarter, you're listening to This Week in E-commerce. Hey guys, Mal here for episode 74 of This Week in E-commerce, and we have another bumper episode with lots happening in the world of retail. Now, a couple of things just to mention off the top, that we are going to be talking about Amazon and their huge quarter. Going a little bit about Nick Scali and some of the challenges they're facing, Valentine's Day and what the retail economics are around that, and Peloton. But before that, the de minimis exemptions, which we talked about in the last episode, and the US tariffs and duties, which were instated and caused no end of chaos last week. Matter of fact, I had a lot of people who likened it to the early days of COVID with what was called a rapidly evolving situation. And I got to admit, I had a bit of a laugh to see some of the emails which I was receiving referring to a rapidly evolving situation, which I totally understand because it was absolutely bananas. With one moment, people were being told that this was coming in with immediate effect, and it would mean not just the 10% tariff, but also the standard general duties and tariffs also applying as well, which meant that for some brands I work with, seeing increases of almost 35 to 40% on their goods, which were being sold into the US, which was gigantic, and no idea how to deal with that. And even reports from people on the ground in the US that customers were getting contacted from delivery companies telling them that they needed to pay the duties and taxes before it could be shipped. Naturally, this came as a surprise, and there was a huge buildup of parcels, and there were photos of parcels building up all over America, with parcels from China just building up, unable to be shipped because people were unwilling to pay the increased tariffs on them. So noticing that this was becoming a bit of a kerfuffle, what happened was that they very rapidly in the US decided to pause the tariffs, which meant that de minimis was reinstated for a short period of time until they could figure out what the solution was, which is, to be honest, what they should have done the whole time. Actually figured out how they were going to police this, how they're going to ensure that this was going to be introduced with minimum of fuss. But yes, it is currently back in, and we are going to be speaking to an expert in this space. We're going to be talking to Stuart Smith from Global E, Managing Director of Global E Australia, in a special bonus episode of This Week in E-commerce, which will come out later this week, where we're going to be diving into that a little bit more. But we talked about COVID, and one of the brands which was huge during COVID and you couldn't get away from was Peloton. Peloton, who raised a lot of money pre-COVID and over COVID and sold a lot of their bikes, a lot of their connected fitness equipment like bikes, rowers, treadmills, I believe. They were making a lot of noise, and like many brands in the online fitness space were going great over the COVID period. So brands like Sweat and a number of others who were able to really capitalize on that. But since then, with everything reopening, things have quieted down quite a lot for Peloton and other brands of their ilk, where Peloton have been experiencing quite a lot of challenges. The CEO and founder left about a year or so ago, and they have been on a path towards minimizing their losses. And we always thought there might be an acquisition target for someone. Matter of fact, Apple seemed to be a good fit for them. But not even Apple, the richest company in the world, wants Peloton because they've continued to see their market continue to decline. Where in the last year, they saw that their sales decreased by 9% to $744 million, of which $424 million was subscription and $320 was from their core fitness products. But most of that decline seems to come from subscriptions, which is never a good sign for a business like this because it means people are no longer using it. They've bought their very expensive Peloton devices and now just decided that they're just not going to use them at all. Because Peloton requires you to have a subscription to be able to use them, to be able to use it to log in and participate in any one of their online classes. So we're continuing to see this huge post-pandemic readjustment with a lot of the spend and a lot of the winners through that period now really starting to struggle, particularly in this space where a lot of these brands are struggling. So this shift for Peloton of this reopening of the world They weren't ready for it because they had a business model which is very much built on the fact that we expect people to be training at home. Now, for those of you who might remember, Lululemon actually bought a company called Mirror, who had a mirror device, which was you could look in a mirror and would be able to see training being reflected at you, and you could just follow along with what you're seeing in this fitness mirror. They bought it for, I can't actually remember the amount, several $100 million, I believe. They've since closed that down, which shows the challenge in these types of business. That you need to have some level of critical scale, and need to be able to offer some level of convenience or that personal physical relationship which people want and they seek. Because as soon as gyms reopen again, that's where everyone flocked. Because the whole purpose of a place like a gym isn't just for the exercise. It's about being in a communal space. It's about being that third space in people's lives. That if you are someone who is passionate about fitness, you don't just want to go to the gym. It's not just a place to train, but it's a place to also mix and mingle with other people like you. I know for me, I've got several friends who come from where I go to the gym, and my old gym and my new gym, I still stay in contact with them now because there is that communal space. And with a digital only strategy, you miss out on that ability to create real human connections with your customers. And it seems like that's something which Peloton just weren't able to do by having a digital only strategy. Whereas they should have been looking at other opportunities to be able to network, to be able to create a physical presence for their products. But it's kind of hard when the only way to get people around it is to get them to drag $1,000 plus bike to a communal space. Ain't going to happen. And if you want to put people into actual physical exercise on a real bike, it kind of goes against your business model. So I feel that Peloton are really much between a rock and a hard place, in that they have a product which is meant to be consumed by yourself at home, which is digital only, but while doing something which is actually highly social and highly communal. And just doing it virtually through online classes just doesn't seem to cut it anymore. So Peloton, it's that reminder that just because you won during the pandemic doesn't mean that you will win now. And you really always need to be looking at adapting and changing your strategies, or you will get left behind. And that's where Peloton have missed a trick. And that's where I see a lot of brands who were very successful over that 2020 to 2021, 22 period are really starting to struggle. So big changes for Peloton. While they have narrowed their losses, I see that this is not going to end well for them. So watch the space to see what happens next. Okay, moving on to Valentine's Day. So Valentine's Day, actually, before we go to Valentine's Day, we're going to talk about Scali, which is another brand also in that similar boat around that COVID boom. Obviously, during COVID, furniture did really well because where else do we have to go? And even home renovations was huge over that period. Everyone wanted to do home renovations during COVID, but also post-COVID as well, as we wanted to spend more time at home. But now when you factor in a cost of living challenge and also increased interest rates, we have less money to go around, which means that we're starting to see the air come out of that balloon as well, with people spending less and less on furniture. And that happened with Scali, where they saw that their net profit decreased in the last year from 36.3 million, so down 14.2%. And they also saw their written orders decrease 6.2% as well. And they're now looking to shutter some of their Scali and Plush stores around the country. So again, being that victim of that pandemic boom, have seen that while they saw great business over that time, slowdowns with the economy, with the housing market, and interest rate pressures have all combined to be this perfect storm for the furniture market. So all these things are posing to be challenges for Scali to be able to continue to grow, to be able to show some revenue growth in this market, particularly when there's so many other competitors out there. Figuring out what is going to differentiate them in market becomes absolutely critical, but also understanding how they can better appeal to those customers in certain times of their lives. And we contrast that with Webster, who have seen significant growth over the last 12 months. And as we've talked about previously in the last financial report, showed significant growth in new customers with their advertising. And you will now see Webster above the line advertising everywhere. TV, billboards, bus shelters, it's all out there. because they're really focusing on that brand play, showing the world that, showing Australia anyway, that Temple Webster is the default furniture store if you're shopping for furniture online. And they're really owning that space. And that's something which I feel that brands like Nick Scali need to do. They really need to focus on what is going to differentiate them, but also figuring out which customer are they actually appealing to as well, particularly when you can see all these other challenges which they're facing. Now, this Friday is Valentine's Day, and I hope that most of you have some plans for that. You know, if you are married, seeing someone, or single and hoping to see someone, any one of the above. And it seems that Australians are getting more romantic by the year as well, because we're seeing some really interesting numbers coming out of the ARA. So that's the Australian Retail Association, where they're tipping that Valentine's Day spending this year is going to tip over $500 million for the very first time. Matter of fact, we're expected to spend $535 million, so over $500 million, on Valentine's Day across a combination of gifts, hospitality, accommodation, and a variety of things. That is a $70 million increase on last year. So it shows that even though we talked about those challenges earlier about cost of living pressures, interest rate rises, we're still bloody romantic. We still want to go out and treat our significant others with something. And 3.8 million Australians are going to be buying gifts over that period, and 27% of them are going to be the 18 to 34-year-old bracket. So those are some fantastic numbers, which shows that even though there are some pressures out there in terms of like our day-to-day living, we are still willing to invest in the important relationships in our life. And that's a really important takeaway for all the retailers listening to really think about. To think about what are those really important moments in people's lives where we can be present, where we can offer some value in there, and we can give something back to them. We can show them how much we care, because it seems that Australians are really romantic in that regard, and we want to do that. So have a real think about that, about where we have those opportunities in our lives to really encourage our customers to invest in those moments. That you don't want to go and show up with a gift from Temu for your wife. You want to show it with something with some thought behind it, which actually looks like it was manufactured to a reasonably high standard. And when you look at the breakdown of the different states as well, we can see that New South Wales is leading the charge. They're tipped to spend $210 million. So almost 40% of that overall spend is going to be spent in New South Wales. So $171 per person, compared to Victoria, which came in second at $140 million. $150 per person. So that's the sort of benchmarks we're talking about. Spending about $150 to $170 is being spent from every person who is participating in Valentine's Day on their significant other, which is a reasonably decent amount. So thinking about that people are going to invest for those moments. People don't want to skimp out on those moments that matter. So it's thinking about what are those moments that matter, which you can make matter for your business, is going to be really important. And finally, moving on to our big story for the day, it's talking about Amazon and their absolutely gigantic quarter. Now, Amazon, who we talk about a lot, and for good reason, they make up almost 50% of online retail in Australia, at least soon to be, and they're over 50% in Australia and in America. They saw their global net profit increase to $32 billion. That was up 90% on the same quarter last year, for an overall revenue of just shy of $300 billion. That is significant growth for them. But the interesting thing was that what they attributed to wasn't necessarily more demand, but greater demand, naturally, which came about through the fact that they were not just able to have lots of products, but they were able to provide really good last mile logistics. Because that's where they've been able to make the biggest improvements on over the last 12 months. Hasn't been in product assortment. And while, yes, they have been able to be price competitive by introducing new things like their Amazon direct from factory offering, but then also more retailers, more merchants on there, encouraging more sale events such as Prime Days. What they mostly invested in over the last 12 months was their last mile logistics. And what they're saying is that because they've been able to not just show the value through Prime and the Prime delivery options, the innovations they've been able to introduce throughout the whole supply chain has meant that they're able to achieve economies of scale, with their last mile logistics providers. Now, as most of you know, Amazon doesn't actually employ all their delivery drivers. A lot of them are just third-party contractors. So by tapping into that gig economy and being able to show consistent growth by providing better logistics, better innovation in terms of the technology which they use, that you have been able to absolutely maximize the hell out of their last mile logistics, which has meant that customers are flocking to them in droves. Because particularly over that Q4 period where you have Black Friday, but then also Christmas and Boxing Day for that matter, with a lot of late gift buyers, they could rely on Amazon rather than just relying on the typical delivery networks and courier networks who may not have got those gifts to you on time. Amazon were able to guarantee that you were able to receive it by the time which you said they were. And that assurance, that transparency means a lot to customers at those times. Because if you know that a product is going to arrive to you on the day it says it's going to arrive to you and it's a gift for someone, you're going to buy it. There's a higher chance you're going to buy that rather than taking a punt on someone who has a vague 2 to 4 delivery window. So it's showing that those investments into last mile are still super important, that more and more they are becoming table stakes, meaning that if you can't compete at that similar level, you may not even be in the game. Customers may not even consider you because they want something now. And it's one of the biggest challenges in e-commerce, in that we have this expectation that we can get whatever we want and we can get it now. The patience to actually go into a store, walk around, find the right product, and if it's not there, walk into the next store, and potentially leave empty-handed, just isn't there anymore. So these challenges means that we need to be continually looking at innovating. That innovating isn't necessarily about bringing out newer, shinier products, but providing a better experience for your customers. And one final one we're going to talk about is Allbirds. Now, Allbirds is another brand which we've talked about many, many times on the pod. Allbirds were one of the first, actually the first company to actually come up with a recycled shoe. A shoe which was made up of 100% recycled materials. They had the Allbirds Tree Runner, which was one of the most popular shoes for a time, particularly in Silicon Valley, where no tech bro would be caught without wearing Allbirds. They've been undergoing some challenges, particularly since they went public. When they went from D2C only to going into the public markets, their share price took a battering as COVID was finishing up. While it peaked over the COVID period, they've seen a lot of challenges since then. Opening up a lot of stores and now since shuttering a lot of stores. The last 6 months or so, I feel, they have been on a mission to really reinvent the brand. And while those challenges are still, are definitely still there, they're doing this through innovation. And they're doing this in particular through what they call the Moonshot Zero project. Now, the Moonshot Zero project is the world's very first zero carbon shoe. And they have achieved that. Now, they've teased this product for a little while, but they finally have it available. And while it's only available in very limited quantities, I believe it's only going to be 500 units all up, they're doing this at a very affordable price. So what I think anyway. So for USD $200, you can buy the world's first zero carbon shoe. And it actually looks kind of cool. It's a black boot-like thing, and it looks really trendy. Yeah, it looks quite fashionable, in fact, and much better than some of the original shoes which they came out with. So this is a really strong statement of intent, I feel, with the brand which has been floundering, now putting a stake in the ground and doubling down on what made it famous, which is going to be environmentally friendly, sustainable shoes. And while the price point may not be the most accessible, I feel the novelty around that means that it could be a really hot product. Similar to how when we saw the Meta Ray-Bans originally release, and now Meta going very mainstream with how it's marketing the Meta Ray-Bans, this could be Allbirds' product to bring the brand back to relevance. And we're starting to see some real big increases in the recycled shoe market. So back in 2021, shoes made out of recycled materials only made up 5% of total shoe sales. Now in 2024, that number has increased in 3 years to 20%. So we're seeing a 4x growth over that time interest in people wanting to buy shoes made out of recycled materials. So while the sustainability train is still lagging far behind, unfortunately, you can see that there is clearly interest and there is clearly momentum picking up. Whether it's going to pick up enough where a large number of people are going to want to purchase a $200 zero carbon shoe is still left to be seen. But it is still kind of cool to think that this is possible, that we're able to actually start making zero carbon products. So it's going to be really interesting to see when this launches, how many consumers are willing to pay for this. I dare say it's probably going to be a sellout, but it's really exciting to see nonetheless. So Allbirds, good luck to you. We really hope that for that company born in the ditch, across the ditch, that you can find success and relevance back again with your Moonshot Zero project. All right, that's all we have time for this week, because we are also going to be publishing a very special bonus episode at the end of the week, which is going to be with Managing Director of Global E, Stuart Smith, who's going to be taking us through a bit of a deep dive into what's been happening with the de minimis changes. There was a lot of interest on this with the last podcast, so I thought I would actually speak to an expert and not just try to pretend to be one about this topic and really talk about why this came to be, some of the challenges which we're facing, but more importantly, what every retailer needs to be thinking about going into this new era of online retail. So that's all we've got time for this week. Please, if you like what you hear, give us 5 stars, comment, rate, tell a friend about it. It's the way that podcasts like this get found. We love creating this content for you to help keep everyone informed about what's happening in Australian retail. So until next week, or the bonus episode, have a great week.